You're listening to Convenience Matters, brought to you by NACS. Whether it's for food, fuel, drinks, or snacks, about half of the U.S. population shops at a convenience store every day. We'll talk about what we see at stores and what the future may hold for our industry.
A lot of things in life are optional. Eating is not one of them. And if you think about people eating 3 times a day, that's 1 billion meals a day in the United States. Another thing that's not optional is food safety for those meals. That's what we're going to talk about today. Welcome to Convenience Matters. My name is Jeff Lenard with NACS.
And I'm Chris Blasinsky with NACS. And we are joined today by Barbara from Food Safety Magazine.
Thank you for having me here today.
And we have Jeremy from Cumberland Farms.
Hello. Glad to be here.
So Jeremy, I'll let you give your introduction of yourself and your company real quick, if you don't mind.
Sure. I'm the Director of Food Safety for Cumberland Farms. We are located in the Northeast. We also have a pocket down in Florida. We do a ton of food service, anything from, heat to serve foods to pizza to really anything, roller grill. And we do specialize in coffee as well. We have around 600 stores. And we also have a on-site commissary where we produce a lot of our food that goes into the sandwich case and the freezer case. And we also do our self-distribution.
And Barbara?
Well, first I should say that Cumberland Farms is in my neck of the woods. They have really great ice cream.
We also have really great ice cream.
You have really great ice cream. But I'm Barbara Van Renterhem, Editorial Director at Food Safety Magazine. We've been in business almost a quarter century. And we really try and be a science-based resource for the entire food industry, farm to fork. And so bringing the consumers along as well. So lots of gaps out there that we need to fill with food safety.
So Barbara, your latest issue has a really great article on convenience stores and food safety and the unique nature of food service in our industry. It's a, 22% of in-store sales. Jeff, is my data correct there?
It is correct.
22% of in-store sales, and it is growing. And, I think, I'm glad you and Jeremy connected and got that article going because you were able to talk with other industry leaders as well who just, believe heart and soul in food safety and food safety culture within their business. And, what were you surprised the most about when you started to dig into that and learn more about the convenience store industry?
It really sparked because of a conversation with Jeremy. We had him on our podcast, and it became really apparent that, C-Store is really unique. It's part food service, part retail, sometimes part manufacturer, distributor, and there really aren't great training tools that really fill that need in that store environment. There are some really unique challenges. And so I talked with Jeremy about assembling a panel, but also bringing a state regulator on board too, to see if we could move the needle and develop some resources and tools that C-Store folks could then, use going forward. So we're still trying to move the needle in that regard.
Jeremy, when you think about food safety, we just talked about food service,
Sure.
but food safety goes beyond prepared foods.
Absolutely.
For somebody who has a store, thinking about a store, or thinking about food safety to a much higher level than they used to, what does food safety involve? Is it particularly prepared food, or do you have to look across the entire spectrum of the store?
You have to look at everything because the way food safety works is that there's not one element that if you take care of that element, then you're fine. You're protected. It's a stepwise process. And things contribute to each other. For example, you can have the best cooking, cleanest kitchen in the world, but if you have disgusting bathrooms, and you don't have any working hand washing sinks, then you still got a neurovirus risk there. So what you have to look at is food safety is a holistic practice. It's really, you can't do it in silos. And the person that's going to be opening up a store and they say, okay, what does food safety mean to this store? They have to really look at every single element right down to the design. For example, if you put a hand wash station in the path of someone that they go regularly, they're going to use it. If you put it out way in the left corner by, like the, the beverage counter, they may not use it. And that's what you really have to think about. So you have to really be prepared to really go through with a fine-tooth comb on every part of your store to make sure you can guarantee food safety.
So you don't grab that key attached to the hubcap and go around the side and all that stuff. That is not going to work.
It's not going to work, especially, and the funny thing is about that key is like never touch the key. Never touch the key. You need to sanitize that key because what do you do after you go to the bathroom? Hopefully the person washed their hands, but then they touch the key. So, yeah.
Don't touch the key.
Okay, there's the first takeaway from today.
Yes, don't touch the key.
There are a lot of really unique challenges, I think, in this environment that the more I learn about this space, the first is a lot of these businesses have stores in multiple states, so they're dealing with multiple editions of the food code. Jeremy tells me in Massachusetts that a town can essentially circumsede state regulations. So I'm always learning crazy things like that blow my mind. So there's a need for harmonization across the board anyway, but we're just trying to really scratch the surface at some of the major gaps so that we can help move the needle and help provide those resources. And part of our educational session was to let people know there are resources available. And I think try to, move the industry in a way that develops some tools that address those unique challenges.
Right. What we do so I come from manufacturing, and when you work in manufacturing, everything's really kind of prescriptive and laid out for you. For example, the federal government gives you FSMA. They give you a guide. If you work in USDA, they give you guides. They say, okay, this is what you have to do. And they even scale those guides if you're a small operator. So you don't have to be a huge multi-billion-dollar manufacturing company to actually be able to practice these things. It's quite different in the convenience store industry. What I've noticed from being my relatively short time in the industry is that everything kind of has to be adapted. And that's a problem because when things are adapted, they're not harmonized. And when they're not harmonized, you're really elevating the risk level because, Guy A that owns one convenience store, he's actually just as risky as getting someone sick as Cumberland Farms, who owns almost 600. So you really have to have things and materials that are ready for Guy A as long with Cumberland Farms. And that's really what we don't have right now.
And when you think about our industry, we talked about don't touch the key.
Right.
But we're also talking about fresh food that may not be even cooked.
Yep.
Apples, bananas, and what are the food safety precautions or guides that you have for how do you display bananas? Is it best in a wicker basket, metal basket, no basket? What are some of those guides that you look at beyond preparing food? Sure.
So, like I kind of alluded to before, you have to look at every single element. One of that element is display. How are you going to display something? You can't, if you're going to be selling a package of raw meat, you can't display that next to your sandwich, right? That's the basics. The other piece is something like fruit. So if you have something that has an exterior skin on it that's meant to be peeled like a banana or an orange, no one's actually eating that peel. So the storage practices are pretty wide open what you could do with that. You can't store it on the floor, right? But you can store it other places. If you have something like an apple where the exterior skin has to be eaten, the assumption is that the person that's going to the convenience store, unlike a grocery store, are going to eat that item by the time they get in their car. They're not going to wash it. So you have to look at ways of how do you actually protect that from the consumer, getting sick, because other people are going to handle that apple.
So I love the concept of the food safety culture within an organization. I think with our industry where you have anywhere from a 1 to 6 store operators, 6 to 10, all the way up to the 500 plus, the level of food safety programs, shall we say, could be from highly sophisticated and technical to really just trying to do what they need to do to meet the regulations that are required of them. So that food that food culture, the food safety like mindset within the culture, I think can really help other retailers embrace and not scare, because you don't want to talk about stuff like food safety and scare people from eating, which can happen.
Yeah. It's not a scare tactic,
right?
In fact, one of the things that NACS is, and it's great, with the food safety sessions, is that the retailers create the culture, and even more so, the industry creates the culture. Because if someone like NACS, who's a humongous international association, is saying food safety is a priority of this industry, then even, like I said, Guy A in that single store is going to take it as a priority. And unfortunately, we spoke about this a little bit and touched on it in our session yesterday, that the regulators actually come second. Retailers, we have to be our own purveyors of making sure that we are practicing food safety. The regulators will come up with certain laws and stuff, but those are always after the fact. They are largely reactive. So we have to be the ones that are proactive. So the culture doesn't just start from the CEO down. It starts from the whole organization, the whole industry, and then it will filter downwards.
I think that one challenge for the Guy A that you're talking about is that he's probably wearing a lot of hats. Food safety is just one thing. So I think a challenge for a lot of associations is, how do you reach Guy A and educate him on food safety? It's easy to bring along Quick Trip or Cumberland Farms or 7-Eleven because they are big and they have the bandwidth to address
and
those
multiple
issues.
People working on it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that's a challenge.
I love the name Guy A as a brand.
Yeah.
So anybody that's Google searching and wants to trademark Guy A is kind of a cool store name. One thing I want to touch upon, Jeremy, is it's not just what you do, it's what everybody else does with food before it gets to you. Sure. So how do you look at those elements? Because like you hear, if there's some sort of issue, oftentimes it's the news story is this incident happened when you buy stuff from Guy A. And it is somebody else's stuff that just happened to move through the store. The store had the stuff, but the problem may have happened further upstream. So how do you vet vendors? How do you go through all that process of making sure that everything you sell is safe before it gets to you, which is tall order?
Yeah, so to the average consumer that's not really in the industry, and I mean just like the service industry, I think it's a little short-sighted in that you don't understand how much that prepackaged item has gone through before it actually hits the shelf. And no system's perfect, so there will be recalls that will happen. However, that doesn't mean that you haven't vetted that supplier. One of the biggest risk factors identified for a foodborne illness is buying products from unapproved suppliers. So what we do is we approve them by creating a risk profile, and we take a look and we see, okay, how strong is their food safety systems? Do they do testing? Do they get third-party audit? And just a whole list of other things that you go through. And you take all that information, you create a risk profile so you can identify who is the riskiest, aka who's the most likely to give you a recall or give you a problem, and who isn't. You also have to put certain checkpoints into your organization along the way. So things like checking temperatures of reefer trucks that are coming through at your dock, all the way to doing just certain label checks before you send them out. Because again, food safety is not just like the food item, it's also its packaging, it's also its handling, it's also its storage. So you have to really take a look and identify where your gaps are and work on those. And sometimes it comes in that you have a great supplier and they have a great program and they still have a recall because food is not a perfect item. And in many ways it's still evolving in the way it's actually degrading because of shelf life, and just things do happen. But yeah, the key is to really focus on your supply chain, because the supply chain is really something that it's hard to pinpoint. And the challenge is, how do you pinpoint it? There's a lot of technologies coming on like blockchain. Frank Yanis is calling for smarter food safety, traceability. Well, to us food safety professionals, that's like, thank God someone's finally saying that, because it is always, it's always like a puzzle. Like, okay, how does this get from point A to point B, then to C, and then to actually into our stores? It's actually not as easy as you think. One item can have 3 different manufacturing sites, and they bounce back through each other. So how do you make sure that each manufacturing site is equally as safe as the other?
And I think that for C-store operators, they don't need to reinvent the wheel. Food manufacturers have been doing supplier verification for years, and most of them have kind of a perfected system for how they go about that. I would say that if there's a major supplier of yours that your business depends on, it's not enough to look at the documentation that an auditor's supplying. You have to go visit that supplier and vet them yourself. And I think there are numerous examples in the past where companies didn't do that and they got burned. So,
absolutely, like an audit's just a snapshot in time.
Right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
And it's not too hard to say that people prepare for an audit. So I like to myself just get boots on the ground and actually go and assess it myself, because you could actually see the real picture of what you're dealing with.
And an unannounced, right? You show up.
Absolutely.
And that would be my bias, to show up and say, just being a fly on the wall to see how things are going on. But also I think that it's really important, because of the nature of employee turnover in C-stores, that you really have to empower your employees to say, take a look at the package, or make sure that something's clean, and educate them in a way that if they see something, they have the power to stop it in its tracks and say, I don't think this is safe, and,
Definitely.
call you.
Right.
Yep.
And that speaks to the culture element too.
Right.
Yep. You don't want to scare your employees into not doing the right thing, because you want them to feel empowered to do the right thing.
As a director of food safety, I'm the least important person in the supply chain, because more or less I create the programs. However, I'm not the person always catching things. The most important people are actually the people that are doing the checks, that are receiving the goods into the store, that are actually doing the food prep, that are actually cleaning the stores. Those are the people that are ones that actually prevent foodborne illness. I just put stuff in place to do it, but I'm the least important person, the least really effective person in making sure it actually gets done.
But if something goes wrong, they call you.
Oh, yeah. I'm the emergency line.
You're the bat phone.
Yeah, I love that. I got to get a bat phone.
And Barbara, you mentioned something about how it might feel in society today that there seems to be more recalls than previously noted in the past. But the reality is that the systems are improving. The systems are a lot better than they used to be.
Right, and we have better technology available to detect those outbreaks earlier. So we might find issues that are wrong, but we're able to remove that food from the market before people get sick. So there might have been a lot before flying under the radar, and how many people have eaten something and felt sick? They don't bother to go to the doctor. So I think foodborne illness as a whole is underreported. The fact that it looks like it's on the increase, I really think is just because our detection methods are a lot better.
Yeah, and social media.
Yeah,
exactly.
You can hit people a lot faster if something goes wrong. Than we have.
Well, we also hear about it a lot faster too.
Yeah.
So for example, like when I was in manufacturing, when you would actually hear about someone feeling sick, it has to filter through so many channels. First, the consumer would go to the retailer, then the retailer would go to us, and then finally to us, as I mean, the hierarchy, then it finally filters down to like the production level, and you can actually see what's happening. Whereas now, there's so many technologies in place that you can actually look at social media. Someone's going to literally snap a picture in 30 seconds and say, hey, this is making me sick, or this is dirty, or whatever. And it shows up, and you have to react so much quicker than you used to. So social media plays a humongous part in even just bringing a light to consumer awareness of what may not be safe to eat.
Some public health agencies are actually putting their staff on social media scanning just so that they can pick up on clues earlier.
Yeah.
And it's not about just protecting the brand, because first reaction, if you come from a PR background like me, is like, we need to stop this, stop the message. But the other element is we need to stop this. Whatever it is, let's investigate it and make sure that if there is something here, we're working with the proper folks to stop it.
And the element of transparency. I mean, to be as transparent as you possibly can within a situation.
Yeah, I think we're living in an age that the consumer is smarter than ever. And they have more tools at their disposal than ever to actually see what a company is doing. So as the company, we have to react to that, and we have to say, okay, not that we ever played games before, but because you have so many tools and because you're so smart and because you're so much more aware, we have to be on the cusp of being transparent and make sure that you're being aware of the right information and not the wrong information.
Another challenge that's really come up, at least in my mind, is that C-store folks have to make really fast decisions with really a limited amount of data. And in a perfect world, they would know why their employee called in sick, or they would know, whether something was tampered with or not, or, there are so many things at play, but you have to react really quickly. And so we played out some scenarios in the session where we didn't provide a lot of information, but this is real life. This is how you have to react. And sometimes it's easy to put the brakes on and not want to pull product, but you have to weigh. If I react sooner, I might save more people from getting sick. And that really has to be the tipping point for decision making.
Yeah. Jeremy, you mentioned you guys have a what is this called? Health app or?
Yep. Yeah. So we are creating an application, a software application called Health Check, and what that's doing is we're looking at the problem of illness reporting, because the FDA Model Food Code says if you have certain symptoms that are indicative of foodborne illness, then you actually have to report it. And inherently, that's a very difficult ask, especially in a industry where a lot of our hourly workers, there's high turnover, and there's also a lot of workers. We have over 8,000 staff. So we decided that we have to go at this in a way that protects the public health and the PHI, and we have to make sure that the program's only as good as we can elicit information from the employee. So we created this app so that they could actually go on, they can text in, they could call into it, and they speak to a chatbot. And that chatbot has been designed with a clinical consultant to actually mimic someone speaking to a doctor. We had a doctor actually on the team that helped me with the question and answer portion of it. And what that does is it takes the embarrassment element out of it. One reason we always use is that if there's a female employee that comes in and she's vomiting all the time, and vomit is one of the symptoms that they say you have to report, then you don't want to have them to push them to tell their manager that I'm vomiting, and the manager says, well, why? And we don't have to want her to say because I'm pregnant, because that's not our right to force her to say that. It's her right when she decides to disclose that. So now she could go on this app and she can go through a series of questions, and she could say something. No one else sees that information. That's actually protected. The only people that can literally see those chat logs are myself if I need to audit them for whatever reason, and our HR partner. And she could give the reasoning, and she won't be excluded. We also really want to be conscious of, we don't want to exclude employees just willy-nilly, because a lot of our team members, they do work paycheck to paycheck. And it's really unfair to just exclude them for vomiting when you don't really know, is it actually indicative of foodborne illness, or is there like a million other ways that they're vomiting?
When you think about some of the factors that are motivating to people, fear and shame, that there's a motivation to do things sometimes, and some more in what we're talking about here, not do something.
Right.
So things like that allow you to tell the importance of what's going on, but without adding elements of fear and shame. That's the way to make the food chain safer.
Yeah, absolutely. And fear and shame are motivators, but they're also very quickly demotivators, as you alluded to and mentioned. And that's why I really try, when I'm doing some training, food safety training, or talking about food safety, I try to stay away from the nuclear option and saying, oh, if you don't do this, the whole world's going to shut down, everybody's going to get sick. I'd rather go the other way and motivate this is how you're going to make people healthier in the end because you're going to do this and you're going to protection. I like to use the word protection rather than sickness because once people start to fear, then all of a sudden they're like, I'm not even touching this, forget it, I'll let someone else take care of it.
But I think also allowing them to have some pride that, what the job that they have to do is so important to protect customers and consumers of your products from getting ill. And to give them that ownership and engagement will allow them to be compliant.
Would you give this to your mother? Would you give this to your children?
Right.
Would you give this to your grandchildren?
Right, exactly. Yeah, they say, I can't remember the article I read, but I'm a self-confessed nerd, so I do a lot of reading and look at a lot of studies. And one of the studies on, I don't remember where it was from. I'll look for it because Barbara, you may be interested in it. Was on health education, and they said that the way to make it matter for people is by making an emotional connection to the topic. So we do try to make that emotional connection, and I think it really goes well, and I think it really plays well, and anybody can connect to the topic of getting someone that you either love or you respect sick. So it's a good way to do it.
And in looking at takeaways, first off, we learned from Jeremy, don't touch the key.
Never touch the key.
We know that.
Do
never touch the key. But when you think about food safety, it's like you're not alone. There are resources, and I'd like to mention 3 with Barbara. Number 1, the article, Keeping Food Safe in the C-Store Environment, is the August-September issue of Food Safety Magazine. Google it. You can read that, and I don't think it's protected, but after you read that awesome article, which gives you incredible detail, subscribe to the magazine. That's point number 2.
Absolutely.
And there are touch points, regular touch points with your podcast. Do you want to tell everybody about the podcast?
Right. So, interestingly, the name of our podcast is Food Safety Matters, that we've been doing for over 2 years now. We had Jeremy on, so his podcast would be a must listen, and you can subscribe to the podcast. You get a little notification. We also have a player on our website. I think the important thing that we try to do, we don't have any barriers for folks to access content. Subscriptions are free. The podcast is free. We want to be the science-based resource for folks in food safety. So, and I think we are the science-based resource. Thank you. Because it's really important that we can reach as many people as possible. Folks that come to your show, you don't have to sell them on, ideas about C-store business. Folks that come to the food protection meetings that the magazine often goes to, you don't have to sell those people. That's why they're there. But one of my personal goals is really to reach the folks who aren't at this meeting, who aren't at the meetings I attend, because those are the folks that are also involved in, keeping the public safe with the food that they're producing.
Can I add a 4th takeaway?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, 4th takeaway is that one C-store recall reflects poorly on all of our C-store industry. So, I was talking with Jay Ellison, and I actually, when he had the Cyclospora, when he had that Cyclospora outbreak, I was actually getting calls at my office saying, "Guy, are you involved in this? What's happening?" So, it sounds a little corny, but we all have to support each other. Food safety can't be segmented. And I think the manufacturing community has done a really good job of that. The C-Store, we need a little more help. And we need a little more help by benchmarking food safety programs to see what are the minimum expectations, as well as we need to create more avenues for, working together. So things like panels, IEFP, the International Association of Food Protection, we have a lot of different panels and we have a lot of different working groups that talk through issues like sanitation and food prep and all that. It'd be great to see NACS to do that as well, because that's what's really going to impact the industry. Like I said before, if the industry says this is the minimum expectation, is that food safety is priority, it's going to really trickle down to everyone, even Guy A that owns that one store.
Speaking our language.
Yes, well, convenience matters. So thank you both, Jeremy and Barbara, for joining us today.
Thank you.
As I said, convenience matters. Thank you for listening to Convenience Matters. Food safety matters. Start
Absolutely.
listening to that. Thank you both.
Great.
Thanks
you.
for having us.
Absolutely.
And thank you for listening to Convenience Matters.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.